Welcome to the Not-for-Profit Podcast. My name is Matt Williams. I'm your host. Today we're going to talk to Tim Oberg, Strategic Alliance Partner for Parkrun. And we're going to talk about what it takes to run an NFP and that has large growth throughout Australia. This will help NFPs in that growth stage or NFPs that are starting out and know they're going to have a lot of growth in the first early years, and what it takes to be able to manage that growth to ensure that the meaning and the simplicity of the NFP is not lost. We delve into 3 points. The first one being seek or pay for advice on the legal setup of the entity. This just ensures that when growing and when moving forward, that everything can be taken care of and you don't have to go back and change things later. The second point we take away is keeping the model simple for scalability. In this case, Tim talks about the parkrun and how it goes from 2 to 5 to now 360 locations, and the simplicity of the model to be able to ensure that it is scalable on a large model. The third point we look at is managing a remote team and the best practices and resources for this. Tim delves into where Parkrun is based, how the office is set up, and how they manage that setup with people in different locations. Let's get talking to Tim. Thanks for joining us on the Not-for-Profit Podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Platinum Audits. All your auditing needs, just jump onto platinumaudits.com.au. Welcome, Tim.
G'day, Matt. Great to be here.
Tim, just if you could I know what Parkrun is, and there's a few people out there that will know what Parkrun is, but just give us a bit of a history about what Parkrun is and how it came about in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, nuts and bolts of what Parkrun is that if you go to one of over 360 parks in Australia on a Saturday morning, you might see a whole heap of people having a run and a walk together and hopefully having a laugh and having a good time. And that's Parkrun. So it's a free timed weekly 5 kilometre running and walking event. And really the emphasis is around participation. It's not around being fast or being slow or whatever that might be. It's just about getting out and having a run or a walk with your friends and family on a Saturday morning. So in many ways, it's a health intervention. We're trying to make people healthier and happier. And in fact, our mission is around health and happiness. And as I say, it's free and it's for everyone. And we hope it's going to be forever.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I introduced Parkrun 5 years ago myself. It helped me through a lot and it's helped me lose a lot of weight. So I love it. And hence the reason we're here today. So,
for sure. Look, I came across Parkrun when I was living over in the UK. So I grew up in Brisbane originally, and then in my early 20s moved to London, which was 2001, and I lived there for 10 years. And it was towards the back end of my time living there that I came across Parkrun. It actually started in 2004 in Bushy Park, which is a park in southwest London. And yeah, I came across it just as a participant. I was in the process of, I guess, packing my life up in the UK. I'd been there for 10 years and I was engaged, and my now wife and I were getting married and planning on moving to Australia. And I was looking for, I guess, something a little bit different career-wise. I certainly didn't think Parkrun itself was going to be a career, but I studied human movements at university, so I'd always wanted to do something in and around sport, health, and fitness. In the UK, I actually ran my own travel business for the majority of the time I was there. So I was looking to get out of that and back to something that I was extremely passionate about, and found Parkrun. And I thought, if I bring this back to Australia, it'll be a bit of fun and it'll be a good way for me to grow my professional network. Yeah, as I say, never thought it was actually going to evolve into being a job, but here we are 9 years later, and as you say, as we know, it's certainly a job for me now, that's for sure, and has been since about year 2. So I think I went full time on Parkrun in the middle of 2012. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Did probably, you said you had the travel industry and you had the human movement side of things. Did you have any experience with not-for-profit sector before that?
No, interestingly, no, nothing. I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial streak in me, and when I was in university, I ran my own mobile DJing business. I used to DJ parties weddings and things like that. So I had a bit of an entrepreneurial streak there. And then the UK, I taught for a couple of years when I was first there, because I had an education degree as well. But then ended up setting up my own travel and events business. So I think I certainly had the entrepreneurial, I guess, flair was one of the things that I guess was made me suitable for bringing parkrun to Australia. Certainly had a bit of get up and go, but navigating my way through the world of not-for-profits was definitely something that was new to me. And to be honest, it's still something that I'm learning day in, day out. And I think I'll preface everything I say on this podcast by saying I'm happy to be corrected should I say anything wrong. So, but yeah, it's been a massive learning curve for me from starting up parkrun with minimal experience in not-for-profits, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is all about, is taking that experience and sharing it on a large volume as much as we can to get that knowledge out to people like yourself who are in your same boat starting up. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So,
Brilliant.
what was in the beginning? What was the biggest challenge for you in the NFP sector in relation to starting up, getting running? Was it knowledge base? Was it contacts? What was the biggest hurdle?
Yeah, look, I think like probably a lot of people listening, when you start to go down that not-for-profit route, you find that there is some clear direction that's provided here in Queensland, where we were established and where you're based, Matt. The state government do provide some basic information on getting started. Complete this form, submit it here, etc., etc. I think other than just following those steps, you've got to do things like set up a board and create your constitution and so on and so forth. And that's where I think it started to get interesting / complex. and like probably most not-for-profits, the original board was myself, my wife, my neighbour, my best mate, that sort of thing. And you evolve your board from there. But I think very few not-for-profits probably start off with a full grasp of everything that's involved and hit the ground running. And parkrun was certainly, we didn't have that. We initially, and I guess got more professional as things went along and we grew. And then when we started becoming responsible for money from grants and sponsors and so on, then you really need to have your house in order. So yeah, but in those early days, it was very much friends and family were the board, and board meetings were around the kitchen table and so on, and it kind of evolved from there.
Yeah. If you could go back now, like 9 years later, if you could go back to your start again, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, there's probably too many things to mention. But look, I mean, I think one of the things that we're looking at now is whether our current legal status, which is, I guess, what we set up way back then, which was being an incorporated association, whether that is actually the most appropriate status for where we are now. Potentially we could have become a company limited by guarantee, right back then even. So I think in terms of advice, I guess if you're going to look to seek advice or even pay for advice, that's probably a really good question to ask right from the outset, is what is the appropriate, I guess, legal structure, not just for where you are then, but for where you aspire to be. Because to change structures is probably more complicated than getting it right at the start. So yeah, we're at a point now where we are almost certainly going to be changing our legal structure. It's served us well, being a corporate association has served us well to this point, but moving forward, it won't be the most appropriate. So I think that's probably some advice to myself would have been probably to investigate that a bit more right at the start.
Yeah, and invest a bit more money. It might cost a little bit more, but invest it straight up. That way, you're ready to go when down the track, 9 years, 10 years time.
Yeah, and even not even necessarily money. I mean, the government have lots of advisors, and there are seminars and so on that you can go to, or webinars and everything. So there is a lot of information out there. We're quite lucky here in Australia and here in Queensland where this information is quite readily available. Now, that's not always going to be the case depending on where your listeners are based.
Yep, absolutely. If that change in structure, how does that? Because you said there's 360 parkruns. I'll diverge. I've got a little bit of knowledge in the background. I'm a run director myself of my local parkrun. In that change of structure, will that change the face of Parkrun Australia as it is, or is it just like the operating in the background?
Yeah, no, it's very much in the background.
Yep.
Most people who participate at Parkrun on a weekly level would actually have no interest and or understanding of what our legal structure is. It's really just something that sits in the background. So yeah, no participant would actually notice any difference.
Okay, cool. So in some cases it may actually notice the NFP actually may notice that. So it just depends on how you set it up and how you're operating.
For sure.
From your starting days, like launching, I think the Gold Coast was launched first and went from there. How did you manage those satellites? I use the word term satellites places, and make sure that they ran similarly every time.
I think the key for the success of Parkrun, not just here in Australia but globally, is that the model itself at that local level is so simple. That being so simple, that makes it easily replicable. So the scalability of what we do, be it one event or 1,000 events, it's a very, very, very simple operating model. We are really staunch at knowing what that model is about and what it isn't about. I get requests all the time from people saying, "Oh, Saturday morning just doesn't work for me. Can you do it on a Friday night?" And that's just not what we do. What we do is Saturday morning, and we know that that's never going to please everybody, but we also know that that's what we are. If someone else wants to start up a free Friday night run, then absolutely go for it, and we'd even help share our information and our knowledge to help them do that. But what we are is we are Saturday morning for our 5K series, and our new junior series is on a Sunday morning, which we're launching, which we've launched here. So I think having a really simple, replicable, scalable model is key. And then sitting behind that is we've got a really strong operations team. Well, we do now anyway. Have a really strong operations team that do provide that training and that support to all of our locations, so that they know, I guess, the do's and the don'ts. Now, in the early days when it was pretty much just me, that wasn't always the case. I'm not going to say we were perfect from the outset, and we've had things happen at our parkrun events that I'd like to think wouldn't happen now, just with people not quite understanding the model or trying to innovate themselves, trying to innovate the model away from what we want it to be. Thinking, and I say that as well, with people almost always are acting with the best intentions. It's not a case of people actually trying to do anything wrong, but we've had cases in the past where people thinking, oh, well, if I change this is going to make it better for our local community, and 99 times out of 100 that's not the case. So, but yeah, it's the simplicity of the model that enables it to scale the way it has.
Yeah, and you mentioned you did have a couple of people like try and change things. How do you control that? How do you bring that back in line, back to that simplicity model without actually going, hey guys, without a slap across the face, so to speak, but just manage that in a diplomatic way?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a skill, isn't it? Like, to be able to do that. I mean, I think first of all, there's a lot of repetition that goes into it. So, we show people what to do, and we repeat, and hopefully that it goes in. And we provide the resources, the training tools, be it a manual or an online wiki or whatever it might be, that's going to actually provide information that people can refer back to. But in saying all of that, we have had examples in the past where we've had to step in and move people on, and that is very challenging, particularly when they're volunteers. And as I say, almost always people are doing things with the right intentions, but sometimes even with the right intentions, their values might not align with our values. So they'll think that what they're doing is completely correct and appropriate, and we won't. And if that's the case, it's just makes the relationship untenable. So thankfully that rarely happens, but it certainly has happened. And in terms of how you do that, yeah, it's a people management skill, isn't it? And certainly, my style is not to be overly confrontational. Like, certainly try and do anything like that in a nice way, and always thank people and remind them that although maybe the relationship's not going to work moving forward, that almost inevitably people have always done something that they can be proud of, and so there is always a legacy, and hopefully a positive legacy for anyone that doesn't continue with us.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And yeah, people skills and people management, that's one of the toughest things in any gig, not for profit, for profit, doesn't matter where you are. I'm in the same boat as a business owner. So moving forward and growing, you said you come on full-time second year, and then you started to grow the team. How how do you know when that time is right to bring somebody on, not bring somebody on, manage that workload? What were the key signs for you and the telling factors? Okay, I've got to do something here.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, like when I started Parkrun, it was never with the thought that it was going to be an income or a job for myself. However, we were fortunate that in the first year that we were operating, we signed a commercial partner, Adidas. They came on and they signed a 3-year relationship with us. And obviously, when you start signing contracts and accepting money from people, then that ups the ante of what you're doing and what you have to deliver. And by the sort of second year of operation, there was enough money in that contract that enabled me to actually start working on Parkrun as a job. So in terms of myself being able to be paid, it was simply a case of, was there enough money, yes or no, to pay myself? And then, there was just enough to pay myself in year 2, which was great. And that was a complete game changer. When you look at the growth of Parkrun over that time, we were going along at a rate, and then you can almost see to the date when I started working on it full time, the growth almost doubled in its speed. So there was a really noticeable acceleration of growth when I was able to commit full time to working on the business, as you would expect. And then, look, again, it's not too dissimilar moving forward. I was the only full-time paid employee for a number of years. We started to get more successful at generating revenue through not just sponsors, but also grants and so on and so forth, local council grants, state government grants, etc. So this created additional revenue streams. And we got to a point where we were probably one sponsor away from being able to bring on another staff member. And so I'd been negotiating with Medibank, the private health insurance company here in Australia. I'd been negotiating with them for a number of months over coming on board as a partner. And I said to Renee Gimbert, who became our second employee, I remember us having lunch with her, and I said, if they sign on, you can quit your job because I'm gonna hire you. And that's exactly what happened. So Medibank came on as a commercial partner, and we're able to hire Renee. And from there, it's gone that way again, with just more revenue coming in. I think at some point in the life of any business too, also, whether it be a not-for-profit or for-profit, there is a point where you take a bit of a punt. So it's not just, is the money there? You sort of got to think, okay, the way things are heading, is it appropriate for me to hire someone or not? And I think any business owner will know that you have those dilemmas where you sort of think, okay, what does the cart come before the horse or not? And so I've always been quite a risk-averse person, and not willing to go down that path. And sometimes, I think most of the time that's a good thing, but sometimes it can mean you miss an opportunity. But I've always been quite risk averse and not wanting to commit to anything financially until I was 100% sure that there was going to be the money in the bank to cover it. But yeah, that's probably just my nature. I'm sure there are people, plenty of successful people who are the other way, and they'll hire and hope for the best. So I guess it probably depends on your own levels of stress that you're willing to take on during a growth phase of your business.
Yeah. How many people do you have working full-time now and part-time as part of the thing? And how do you manage that? Because I know you're based in Queensland, and I know that a few of the other guys I've spoken to a couple of them in Sydney. How do you manage that relationship? How do you manage that workflow, being the boss and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we've got 7 full-time staff now in Australia, and we have 3 part-time. Now, until about 7 or 8 months ago, everybody worked from home. And we didn't have as many at that time either. So there was probably maybe 5 full-timers and a couple of part-timers there. But we all worked from home. But we made a strategic decision earlier this year that we would start to hub our employees out of the Gold Coast, so out of where Parkrun started on the Gold Coast, as you mentioned earlier. And almost by coincidence at the time, there was a high proportion of our staff who were Gold Coast based. And since that point, we've done any recruitment that we've done, we've recruited to that office. So we've got most of the staff now work out of there. As you mentioned, I'm up in North Queensland. We've also got staff who are in Sydney and Melbourne and also in Western New South Wales. So yeah, we're sort of dotted around a little bit, but then with a core team that are based on the Gold Coast. Obviously, with technology being what it is, though, this enables us to be in each other's pockets kind of day in, day out, just the way you and I are talking right now. And we use Slack as our sort of internal team communication tool. There are plenty of tools out there. That's the one we use, and we find it works really well. And so I'm talking to all the staff regularly, daily basis for most of the staff. The other thing too is, we trust our staff as well to work hard and work independently. And, I guess part of what I do in my role is I empower them to do that. So I'm certainly not a micromanager of people. They can come to me anytime that they need help. But for the most part, everyone, even whether in the office or not, they're working, really hard and really well independently. I try and get down to the Gold Coast office probably on a monthly basis. Although I also find that I'm on the road quite a bit anyway with other sort of parkrun commitments, over to Japan quite regularly for our operation over there and other things that are going on around Australia. So I probably don't get into the Gold Coast office as much as I would like, but then I end up seeing other members of the team travelling to the other various things that we go to. So yeah, it's a bit of an interesting setup with me being here and a lot of the team office based on the Gold Coast, but it's working well.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we use Slack as well in our business because we're a remote business ourselves. I work from home. Everyone's based at home, use the same tools. It's great. And like you said, we have technology meetings just like this every week, twice a week, and Slack for everything else. So it works well. So do you find that doesn't suit some employees? Have you had, from my knowledge base, like from of Parkrun, there's not been a lot of staff turnover, but has it not suited some people, or is it just pretty much, for me, Parkrun seems to be, there's an ethos and you live Parkrun, and I don't live it to the full time, but I live it on weekends because I'm involved. But do you find that there's anyone that hasn't suited that ethos that have worked for you and that just couldn't quite mix in, or has it been pretty steady?
Look, I think the biggest challenge and what I'm most conscious of with remote staff is around social isolation. So it's all well and good for us to talk like we are right now and on Slack and so on. And but I am, as I say, I'm conscious of those who may still feel socially isolated and whatnot. One of our staff is full time, but she's based in Sydney. She lives by herself. So she takes herself, most days she takes herself off to the local RSL and sits in the RSL and gets on the Wi-Fi, and it's become a bit of a running joke that she's in the RSL every day, but you can't call her at 11 o'clock because they're doing the last post and everything like that. So that's something that I'm very conscious of is as much as, a lot of people will think, working from home, it's the dream. But it has its challenges. And, my house is actually about 200 meters behind where I am now. But I am in an office. So I do actually, get dressed, leave the house, go to the office, all those things. And I find that really valuable. But my life is still extremely social. I've got 3 kids and I'm working above a cafe. So pretty much almost every day I end up wandering down from my office down into the local cafe because there's people I know down there and having a chat and everything like that. So that's just, so I guess the social isolation's part of having people who work remotely is something we're really conscious of, and something I was talking about this morning actually with the team is just making sure that we're staying connected and having a schedule for those who aren't in the office to get to the office on a pretty regular basis, be it monthly or whatever that might look like. So so it definitely has its challenges, but if you're conscious of them and you're proactively trying to minimize them, then there's certainly things that can be worked around.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's cool. If you got advice for an NFP that's looking at growth stage, going between, do I put somebody on, don't I put somebody on? What's some key factors? Like obviously you mentioned before money, making sure the money's there, you're risk adverse, so the money has to be there. But what's some key factors to say to them, you need to do this? If you're at this point, you should be doing full time or, at least part time, that sort of thing. What are the key factors that you found in Parkrun where that happened?
I think people, when they come to work for a not-for-profit, for the most part, you're taking a pay cut. I think that's one thing that most people need to understand is that you're probably not going to get, your top market rate by working at a not-for-profit on a salary. And that's just, I think, pretty much across the board. So hopefully the not-for-profit that you're going to work for is something that you do believe in and that you're passionate about, because what you might be missing for in the pay packet, hopefully you're going to make up for in job satisfaction. And that's something that we've seen. Almost all of our staff have come from within the sort of parkrun community. They're people who have become park runners, and then they're volunteering, and then they become ambassadors, which are our sort of senior volunteers, and then you end up getting to know them, and then if there's a job, they apply for the job and go through the process, and they end up being good people for the role. So I think having people who are passionate for whatever your cause is, and I guess most not-for-profits, it's going to be some sort of cause or charity that it's working for. So having people who are passionate about that and understand it is something that's been crucial, and I guess that's been really helpful in terms of having bringing people on. Is they've almost been having auditions for the role for a number of years. You already knew who they were. You know what they're about. You know their work ethic. You know their values. You know if you get on with them or not. All those things that are important. So outside of that, I mean, often it is simply a case of money. It is. Does the dollar signs fit? And that's where you got to have a good accountant or someone like that who's going to give you a nice forecast that you can look at and say, well, if we bring on an employee, what's that going to look like, and crunch the numbers. And it's pretty safe to say that if you bring on an employee, then you can look at that's hopefully going to increase your productivity, whatever it is. You might be selling a product or whatever. So you forecast what the increase in that would look like, as well as the increased salary. Does it fit? Yes or no? And then you go from there. So, unfortunately, that's the reality for most businesses and most not-for-profits. It's going to be simply around, do the numbers work?
Brilliant. Appreciate it. Mate, we're just about out of time. Any last points you want to bring up? Anything you want to give across for the listeners, just to say, hey, look, do this, do that, go out there and do it. Just, like we've had a couple of people say, just go jump in and do it. Sometimes you just got to do that. So any last thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think really what working for Parkrun and working in a not-for-profit has given me is an immense amount of satisfaction in my day-to-day job. I know that what we're doing is having a real impact on people. It's really hard to put into words what that means. And as I said a minute ago, you may be in the corporate world, there's more money for you, but if you can do a job that is satisfying, and there's the old cliche, if you love what you do, then you're never really going to work. And I think that's how I feel. So I think if you can see yourself doing that, and you can see yourself doing something that you really love, then hopefully it means you can never work another day in your life, and you'll have a great satisfaction when you go to work. So yeah, I think that would be my advice.
No, brilliant. Mate, we've covered a lot of stuff. I'd like to get you back on the show at some stage down the track, if that'd be okay, just to go through a few more things. I'd really appreciate it. But thanks very much for your time today. And thank you very much for coming on the Not-for-Profit podcast.
Too easy, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate.